My sister said, "Don't come to my wedding." I went anyway. What I heard during the vows changed everything. I'm a 32-year-old man, and my sister told me not to come to her wedding in a 5-line text that felt like a shove down a staircase. Her exact words were, "Don't come Saturday. It'll be better for everyone. Please respect this." No explanation. No fight to reference. Just a door clicking shut. Her name is Laura. She's 2 years younger, the kind of person who can rearrange a room with a smile and a clipboard. Growing up, adults called her a natural leader. I thought it meant she liked being in charge. I didn't know it also meant she'd learned how to narrate other people's lives until they agreed with her. We weren't always like this. Childhood was us on bikes, us building forts, us splitting the last popsicle by sawing it with a butter knife while Mom laughed and said we'd grow out of the need to measure everything. Then Dad died when I was 19. Grief took the roof off the house. In the drafts that followed, Laura figured out that if she spoke quickly enough, she could decide which windows stayed open. She got good at being necessary. I got good at being quiet. After college I dated Sophie for 3 years. We were engaged for 10 months. It ended with a suddenness that made people assume there was a big reason. There wasn't. At least not one I knew then. One day she stopped returning calls. 2 days later I got an email that felt typed by a person who had turned their heart into a spreadsheet. "We want different things. I can't be what you need." It came from her address. It also had one sentence I'd never heard in her mouth: "Your dependency on your family is unhealthy." It read like someone had tried to translate us into another language and kept the punctuation but not the tone. I sent 3 replies that bounced. Her number blocked me. Her parents returned the ring by courier. Laura showed up with takeout and said sometimes love is an amputation, clean is kinder. I believed her because believing her has always been the path of least resistance. Last month Laura announced she was marrying Mark. We'd only met him twice. He's the kind of man who speaks loudly to waiters and softly to women he wants to impress. Their relationship had the speed of a runaway shopping cart. My mother clapped with both hands the way she does when she needs the room to clap with her. I kept my opinions in my pockets. Then the text came, "Don't come." I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Why?" She replied, "You've been negative lately and I don't need that energy. This is my day. Please don't make it about you." I'd said nothing. That's the part that dug under my nails. Our mother said it was probably just pre-wedding stress and that I should respect my sister's boundaries. She used the word like a scolding. Saturday arrived with clean sky and that smell the air gets when people iron clothes in 100 houses. I put on a suit anyway. Not to cause a scene. To watch my only sister's life change shape the way a person watches their old street get a new stop sign. I parked far, sat in the back, and chose a seat under a pillar because anonymity is easier when you've got architecture on your side. The church was the kind people use for photo backdrops, white, polite, with a ceiling that pretended to be taller than it was. People I grew up with pretended not to see me. A cousin waved without looking at my face. Mom gave me a quick shake of her head so small it could have been a tremor. Laura walked in on our aunt's arm because tradition is a costume in our family. We wear it when we need to look innocent. She looked beautiful in the way people look when a room is cooperating. She didn't look at the back. Vows. The officiant did his joke about marriage being a journey and everyone laughed on the correct beat. Mark went first. He said the usual things: loyalty, coffee, storms, laughter. Then he paused, smiled at her like he'd rehearsed smiling, and said the sentence that peeled paint inside my chest: "I love how honest you are, how you told me the truth about the email you sent to protect your family from a relationship that wasn't right." The room didn't react because they didn't know the shape of those words. My body did. Email. Protect. Relationship. Not right. He kept talking. You've taught me that sometimes doing the right thing looks harsh from the outside, but it's love. You told me how hard it was to press send. How you cried after. How you carried that until you knew I should know the real you. He lifted her hand and kissed it. There was a little tremble in her wrist that I recognized as pride. The sound in the church changed. It didn't get louder. It got thin. Like the oxygen had been replaced with something that resembled it. I stared at the floor to stop my eyes from learning to be fountains. The email that ended my engagement. The line about dependency, she had written it. She'd written it and sent it as Sophie and watched me unravel and brought me soup. Laura's turn for vows. She started strong. Then she hit a line that bent my entire adolescence into a new shape. I promise summers at the cottage, the way your grandmother wanted us to have them. Thank you for fighting for us to keep Blue Heron when old promises tried to complicate things. Her eyes flicked toward our mother so fast most people wouldn't have noticed. My stomach did that elevator drop. Blue Heron is our grandmother's cottage, 2 hours up the coast, my favorite place on earth that isn't a time machine. Since she died, the cottage existed in our family lore as a shared resource: weddings, wakes, quiet weeks when a life needed mending. We assumed it would pass to Mom, then to us both. The summer after college, Grandma took me out in the rowboat and told me the names of the birds like she was introducing me to neighbors. She squeezed my hand and said, "Places matter. They tell you who you are." When she died, she left a sealed letter for each grandchild. Mine never reached me. Mom said Grandma had been too tired to finish them. I believed her because I was 22 and belief was easier than the alternative. Now my sister had slipped, fighting for us to keep Blue Heron, into vows. Old promises. Complicate. A code any person who grew up in our house could read. There had been a document that didn't say what Laura wanted, and she had fought for a new one. I left the pew during applause because the kindness of clapping was about to turn me into a child. I walked out into the parking lot and stood by a dumpster because concrete doesn't ask you to be gracious. I wasn't thinking revenge. I was thinking about a butter knife sawing a popsicle and a girl who learned that if she measured precisely and smiled, adults would let her decide how the halves were labeled. I was ready to go home when I heard my name. Aunt Diane, Mom's older sister, caught up, breathless and small in a way I'd never seen. She pushed a stiff envelope into my hands. "I should have done this a long time ago," she said. "I'm sorry." The outside was addressed to me in Grandma's slanted blue ink. It had been opened and resealed once. I didn't ask by who. I already knew. The letter was plain and angry only in the way old women allow themselves to be angry, tidy. She wrote about the cottage, about a trust set up years ago, the deed transferred to me upon her death, for safekeeping for the family, because you are the steady one. The words were underlined twice. She wrote that she'd told Mom, that it would cause a fuss, but that fuss blows over and houses remain. She wrote in a postscript, "Tell Laura to use her gifts for mending, not for arranging. If she can't, you need to be the door." My hands shook in a way I hadn't known they could since I was 12. I asked Aunt Diane why she was giving it to me now. She said Mom had lost the letter and then had found it after the will reading and decided not to burden me with logistics. Diane kept a copy because she doesn't trust tidy. She said she'd been a coward because family requires more courage than work ever did. Then she said the thing that took the little oxygen left in my lungs: "Your sister brought a notary to the house 3 months after the funeral. She said it was just to streamline things for your mother." I was there. I should have asked more questions. Streamline. Fight. Old promises. My grandmother had given me the cottage on paper. The notary had given it to someone else in practice. The vows had framed that theft as love. Inside the church, the organ started one of those exit marches that make people feel like confetti. The doors opened and the crowd spilled. Mom saw me and flinched. Laura caught my eye and turned away so fast it could have been a choice not to fall in heels. Mark grinned at everyone like the magician who thinks he did the trick right. I didn't shout. I didn't hold up the letter. I didn't want to be the man people remember as the brother who ruined the wedding. I wanted to stop allowing rooms to make me out of air. I went to my car and stared at the glove compartment because that's where you keep maps when you still believe maps exist. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I'm sorry. I was maid of honor today. I shouldn't have stood there. You don't know me, I'm Elise. I have something you should see. A second later, a photo. A screenshot of a note in Laura's phone titled, Sophie email. The first line, we want different things. I can't be what you need. The word dependency circled with a little heart next to it, like she'd been pleased with the phrasing. I nearly dropped the phone. I asked Elise how she had it. She wrote, Laura asked me to proofread Vows. Her notes app was open. I'm not proud of snooping. It fell open like a trap. She sent one more photo. A list with checkboxes, notary, cottage. Heavy checkmark, /lawyer, deed transfer discussion, heavy checkmark, /email Sophie, heavy checkmark, /tell Mark truth about email before vows, heavy checkmark. The last item had a star next to it. I drove to the reception because if I was going to throw up, I wanted it to be near people who pretended to love me. The venue was one of those renovated barns that makes hay look prettier than it is. Everyone glittered with approval. I slipped to the edge and watched like a man watches a storm through glass. They did the first dance and the cake. Then the speeches, the part where truth either trips over itself or dances. The best man, Luke, is one of those new friends you get when you move into someone else's city. He told a story about Mark changing jobs and Laura cutting through red tape at a bank to help him consolidate scattered accounts. People laughed. I watched Mom stand under a string of Edison bulbs with her hands clasped in front of her like prayer but backwards. I watched Aunt Diane rub her thumb along the stem of her glass until the imprint of the world on her skin must have changed shape. Mom took the mic next. She is not a drunk and she is not unkind. She is a woman who has spent 10 years telling herself a story about what keeping a family together requires. She thanked people, praised love, and then added a sentence that gave her away. Laura has always known what needed doing, even when it wasn't thanked right away. The even sat there like a coin nobody wanted to pick up. I waited until the clatter rose and moved to the hallway where servers were carrying trays and nobody pretends the world is a fairy tale. Elise met me there, hair pinned within an inch of its life, hands shaking. She said she had backups of backups because she grew up with brothers who deleted her wins. She handed me a little drive. She said, I don't want to be in this. I also can't be in denial anymore. I asked her why she'd reached out to me at all. She said because during Vows she saw my face when Mark thanked Laura for the email. I've never seen a person get pushed out of a story so publicly, she said. It felt like watching a pickpocket work in a crowded square. I put the drive in my pocket next to Grandma's letter and felt like a man who finally had objects to hold that were heavier than hope. I didn't confront Laura that night. Not because I'm noble. Because rage is loud and this needed to be quiet. A scene would give her the stage she knows how to use. A file and a letter make different kinds of noise. I left the barn and drove to Blue Heron in dress shoes because my brain demanded the hum of tires on old road. I pulled in at midnight and sat in the dark with the engine off, then walked down to the dock. The water made that small, patient sound it makes when it's waiting you out. I unlocked the boathouse and breathed in the rot and varnish and recognition. On the work table, tucked under a chipped mug, a spare key on a blue ribbon. The label in Grandma's writing, for Jack. She always wrote names like comets, the J long and bright. I put the key in my pocket and felt something under my thumb, another envelope, thinner, taped under the desk. If this is found late, it still counts, it said on the outside. Inside, a photocopy of the deed transfer she'd signed years before, to me, with a note, Margaret knows. She knows how to forgive, too. Remember that. Margaret is my mother. I walked back to the car with the lake behind me reflecting the same stars my grandmother must have counted from this shore before she decided who would hold the house with two hands. I had the letter, the deed copy, the maid of honor's drive, the vows in my ears, and a new understanding. Laura hadn't told me not to come to protect her day from my negativity. She'd told me not to come because some truths only perform well in rooms you control. On the way home, I rehearsed sentences. None of them felt right. Every version tasted like I was auditioning for the role of angry brother in Laura's play. I turned off the radio and listened to the wheel hum instead. The sound felt like it belonged to me. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, the sky had that pre-dawn strip of cold blue. My phone buzzed twice. First, a text from Mom, "Please don't do anything rash. We will talk. I'll call tomorrow." Second, one from a number I didn't recognize but would have known by the shape of the apology, "Sophie. I heard something," she wrote. "I don't know if you want to hear from me. But I think I owe you a truth." I stared at her name until the screen dimmed and thought about how many stories can run at once in one small town without colliding until the exact moment you sit under a pillar in a church and someone uses the word honest into a microphone. I slept for 2 hours then woke with my jaw aching like I'd been biting through rope in a dream. The day didn't care. It began anyway. If you ever want to know who you are without a script, wake up to a text from an ex you still care about and a mother asking you not to be rash while your sister dances on the 12 lies that make up her wedding cake. I made coffee I didn't drink and opened Sophie's message. She said she was sorry. She said she'd let silence do her talking because she hates conflict more than she hates being misunderstood. She said that in the weeks before our breakup she'd started getting emails from me. The first were harmless, busy at work, sorry to cancel dinner, too tired to talk. Then longer notes about needing to cut unhealthy ties, her family not being a good fit, a list of things she should consider if she wanted growth. The sentences were dressed as compassion but wore my skeleton wrong. She replied to a few, confused, then stopped when she saw my real texts didn't match. Then came one with an attachment, a screenshot of my bank account showing a low balance and a note about financial incompatibility. I never sent that. Sophie said she confronted me in a reply and got a response about my defensiveness. She blocked me out of panic, and because the last email included a line that sounded like something I'd say when hurt, "It's okay if I'm not your person." She thought I'd ended it gently and was too kind to call my indecisiveness cruelty. The morning she put the ring in a box, Laura showed up with coffee, just to check on her. I read it 3 times. I asked if she still had the emails. She did. She sent them. The headers were a mess of forwarding and masking from an account 1 letter off from mine. I asked if she knew. She said she didn't. Then she sent one more thing, a selfie Laura had taken in Sophie's kitchen that day, smiling at the camera, 2 mugs on the counter, the caption, "Women supporting women." The date matched my worst afternoon. I sent Sophie a photo of the vows transcript I'd typed out after the ceremony, highlighting the line about the email you sent. She replied with 1 word, "Oh." Then, after a minute, "I'm sorry I believed a sentence in the wrong mouth." It wasn't an ask. It was a small stick propped under a big door. Mom called at 8. No hello. Straight into a tone I knew as, "The family's in the living room and the neighbors are listening." She said Aunt Diane had stirred things. She said Grandma had been confused at the end. She said Laura kept things moving because grief had a way of making people petty. She said if I go to war, Blue Heron would become a court file. I let her talk because her sentences are easier to hold when they run out of fuel. When she paused, I told her about the letter in Grandma's hand and the copy of the deed and the note on the boathouse table and the vows and the maid of honor and the emails to Sophie. I told her I wasn't going to court any more than necessary, I was going to stop pretending the floor was the ceiling. I told her it wasn't war. It was an inventory. People who love each other do inventories, I said. Or they wake up years later and realize they've been furnishing a lie. She started to cry. Not the manipulative kind. The kind my mother does when a story she's been holding slips, and the only thing left to do is sit down and admit the chair you've been standing on is not a stage. She said she'd kept Laura close because after Dad died, Laura made the house work. Bills. Appointments. Services that require people who can ask questions without sounding rude. She took care of me, Mom said. It felt unfair to criticize the hand that was washing the dishes. It wasn't a justification. It was an explanation, which is a cheaper currency. I told her she didn't have to pick a child. She said that's not how it felt. Laura texted me at noon like nothing was happening. Hope you're okay. Sorry you felt weird yesterday. I typed, we need to talk, and sent a location with bright lights and witnesses, a cafe we used to go to after church because the muffins were too sweet for the adults and heaven for us. She arrived in white and sunglasses, the morning after uniform of people who think image can hold story in place. She started before she sat. Boundaries. Negativity. Your energy. I let the words run their course into the saucer of my patience. Then I slid Grandma's letter across. She didn't touch it. I slid the maid of honor screenshot and Sophie's email printouts. She touched those. The part of me that still wanted to be loved by my sister noticed her nails were chipped and that her left thumb has a tiny scar from a childhood fall. The part of me that was done folding watched her eyes when she read her own words. No flinch. Just calculation. She asked where I'd gotten them. I said a person who remembered their name under a vow they didn't write. She smiled. It wasn't amusement. It was the way a person smiles at a problem they think they can manage. She said I was making this ugly. She said Grandma had been old-fashioned and set in her ways, and the cottage would languish under my sentimentality. She said she'd kept it in the family, hadn't she? She said the notary was to help Mom. She said she'd written the email to Sophie because she saw what I couldn't, that Sophie needed a push. She used the word push like a gift. I asked her to say out loud what she'd done, that she'd persuaded a notary to move a house away from a dead woman's instructions and had impersonated her brother to end his engagement. She said the notary was legal. She said the email wasn't a crime. She said feelings aren't facts. I told her sometimes they are confession. She said I should be thankful. I saved you from a mistake, she said. And I protected Blue Heron from you turning it into a shrine. The sentence was a pearl of what she believes, that love equals control when you're really good at it. I told her what I wanted. Not a scene. Not an apology crafted like a press release. 3 things, plain and small. 1. Tell Mom the full truth, not the version where intent bathes the stain. 2. Reverse the deed transfer to what Grandma wrote or hand me a timetable to do it without turning this into a courthouse hobby. 3. Call Sophie and tell her what you did. Not to fix us. To return her the dignity you took with a neat lie. She laughed. Quiet and wrong. You're dramatic, she said. You always have been. Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and said, I'm going on my honeymoon. When I get back, we can talk like adults. She left her napkin on the table, folded into a triangle like a flag. When she was gone, Elise texted again, there's a voice memo too. She sent a file. Laura's voice, the day before the wedding, telling Mark she'd told him the truth about the email because marriage needs honesty, that she did what had to be done with the cottage because Jack is a sweet boy who mistakes sentiment for stewardship. Mark laughed and said, that's why you're going to run our home. You see the big picture. I saved it, then I put my head down on the cafe table for a minute and let my body be heavier than my pride. I didn't tell the internet. I didn't post the memo. I did one thing that felt like placing a weight back where it belonged. I drove to Blue Heron with Aunt Diane and Mom because I needed the 2 women who hold the ends of our family's rope to stand in the same wind. I read Grandma's letter on the porch where she used to shuck corn. I set the copy of the deed next to the ledger Mom still keeps for utility bills, handwriting looping the same way it did on permission slips. Mom cried again and said she was sorry. Not the apology of a person seeking absolution. The simple kind that admits a shape. We called a lawyer from the kitchen because that's where things get fixed in our family, not in offices. He said the transfer could be challenged because of the letter and the tape and the timing. He said it would be messy. He said messy isn't fatal. He said it would be better if Mom asked the court to reverse the transfer herself since she'd been the grantor. Mom nodded like someone taking on a weight her daughter had insisted on carrying for her. She signed. Diane kissed her forehead like a blessing that had been waiting for the right day. I thought about telling Laura we'd filed. I didn't. Her honeymoon didn't need a thunderclap, storms travel fast enough without my help. Instead, I made a list in my notebook. Change the locks on the boathouse because Mark thinks he knows how to fix things and I don't want him fixing this. Call the plumber. Order new screens. Put a small bookshelf in the bedroom with 6 books, 2 children's, 1 cookbook, 1 manual nobody reads, 1 novel with a lake in it, 1 blank. Sophie called 2 nights later. We spoke like people who used to share a house plant, gently. She said she'd talked to Laura. It had gone exactly as expected: charm, deflect, reframe, a little tear, a parting sentence about old feelings, and moving on. Sophie said she didn't call to reopen anything. She called because she realized how fast narratives harden and how many people get left under them. She said she was sorry she'd let someone else's words be mine. I said I was sorry I didn't ask harder questions when her silence arrived. We didn't decide anything. Not friendship. Not nothing. It felt like retrieving a photograph that had been left in the rain and drying it on a countertop with a paper towel you know won't do the whole job but still try. Mom started coming up to Blue Heron on Thursdays with a bag of groceries and a new resolve that made her look taller. Aunt Diane brought a file of documents and a stubbornness that could push a train. I scrubbed the kitchen until the counters stopped feeling like a museum exhibit. The first night we slept there after the filing, a storm came out of nowhere. The lake went loud. The house groaned in the places I knew it would. It held. Mark called once. He wanted to avoid escalation. He said Laura was devastated and had only ever acted out of love. He said they were willing to discuss options if we didn't make this public. He used words my sister taught him. I told him we weren't making anything public, we were undoing a thing that had been done in quiet. He asked if I needed to feel like a hero. I hung up because that question is an insult people ask when they've run out of facts. People talk. They always do. The whispers came in circles, that I'd ruined a wedding, that I was suing my sister, that I was an ingrate, that I'd finally stood up for myself, that this is why families die and why they survive. I didn't answer any of them. I fixed a screen door. I replaced a warped board. I watched a bird I didn't recognize land on the dock and decided it was a heron even if it wasn't, because some lies are harmless, especially the ones that make you kinder to the past. The hearing on the cottage came quicker than I'd braced for. We brought Grandma's letter and the copy of the deed and Elisa's screenshots and a simple statement from Mom. Laura's lawyer argued about clarity of intent and contemporary needs. Our lawyer said intent and document in the same sentence a lot because that's how you cast a spell in rooms like that. The judge wasn't interested in feelings. He liked paper. He didn't say we were right. He said the transfer was to be reversed pending a formal probate review because the original intent was clear and Laura's subsequent actions raise concern. He said nothing about character. Judges rarely do, but the paper in his hand weighed more than my sister's vocabulary for love. Laura didn't look at me when the judge spoke. She looked at Mom. For the first time since Dad died, I felt less angry than sad for her. I could see the girl who decided the only way to be safe was to be in charge of the story and who has never learned what to do when the story resists. Here's what didn't happen. I didn't expose the voice memo at a family dinner. I didn't mail the vows to the local paper. I didn't make a slideshow for Facebook with captions. I kept the file because truth sometimes needs a safe place to sleep. I returned to Blue Heron with a toolbox and a calendar. A month after the wedding, Laura asked to meet. I said yes because refusal turns into a weapon my sister knows how to use. We sat on the porch at the cottage at dusk. She said she'd felt replaced, since we were kids, by my steadiness. She said adults praised my quiet and asked her to keep the noise down, then praised her leadership and asked me to be more assertive, and that she never knew which version of herself would be welcome. She said she took the cottage because it felt like taking the one thing that could never be taken from her again. She said she wrote the email to Sophie because she thought I would forgive her eventually and that the marriage would have been a small life. She used small like an insult. I use it like a blessing. I told her I didn't know how to be her brother in the version of her life where love is a synonym for management. I told her I could be in a room with her, hold a baby of hers, bring soup when she's sick, help with a storage locker when a life changes shape. I told her I couldn't hand her the keys to the house where our grandmother wrote our names on masking tape on the bottoms of chairs to make the world feel fair. I told her I wasn't angry anymore in the way that makes your mouth taste like pennies. I was done. She cried. She asked if we could reset. I said resets are for devices. People do repairs. She nodded. She looked at the lake like it was a person she could charm. It didn't applaud. Mark and Laura went to therapy according to someone who loves updates. Maybe it will teach them a vocabulary that doesn't turn other people into settings. Mom started saying no to things that used to be automatic yes. Aunt Diane brings lemons and a cake tin and refuses to let any of us talk about what people are saying. Sophie texts me a photo sometimes of a dog she adopted who looks like Trouble and Comfort had a baby. I text back a picture of the doc in different weathers. We are not a couple in a movie. We are two people whose names still know how to find each other without adding a plot. People think the big change was in the vows, that line about the email. It was a fuse. The real change was smaller, me in a back pew deciding to stop letting rooms be scripted by whoever speaks first. Me in a parking lot taking an envelope I should have seen years ago. Me standing in a boathouse holding a key with a blue ribbon and deciding that my grandmother's instructions weren't a curse on joy but a blueprint for keeping everyone dry when storms pretend to be weddings. If you need a clean ending, I don't have one. Blue Heron is back under my name while the slow probate clock ticks. In practice, it's still what Grandma intended, a place where the family can come when their roofs leak. Laura hasn't visited since that porch conversation. She will, one day. The house will still stand. Houses don't keep score, they keep weather. Sometimes at night I lie awake and the vows replay uninvited. My jaw tightens. Then I remember the other sounds, water on pilings, screen door hinges, my mother laughing in a kitchen she thought she'd lost, my aunt humming as she dries a dish that's already dry. I'm learning to choose those sounds first. I'm not the hero. I'm the brother who finally stopped measuring popsicles with a butter knife while someone else wrote the labels. I wish I had learned sooner. I also know I wouldn't have. People change when their names get said wrong into a microphone in a room full of witnesses. That was my moment. I walked in uninvited, sat under a pillar, and heard a sentence that tried to evict me from my own life. And I did the least dramatic, most revolutionary thing I could think of. I stayed standing, and I picked up the pieces without asking the room for permission. The day I got the judge's note about the cottage transfer, just a temporary reversal, a pause in the machinery, I took out Grandma's letter and read the last line again, tell Laura to use her gifts for mending, not for arranging. I can't tell her that. She only hears instructions when she writes them. I can live it, though. That's the part nobody can edit out of the vows. And even now, on quiet mornings when fog sits on the water and the dock looks like it might float away, I still catch myself thinking the sentence I hate, I don't know what to do. Then I sweep the porch, I make coffee, I fix the hinge that squeaks, and I wait for the day to offer me a small job I can finish. That has to be enough.
Follow me for more stories.